All right. Well, welcome everybody to the first traffic calming meeting for Ben Allen Road. My name is David Greaves and I work with NDOT on the traffic calming program. So I'll be facilitating this meeting tonight. We're meeting virtually only on June 9, 2025 here at 6:30 p.m. Just a quick agenda. I want to make sure everyone sort of knows what to expect. We're going to start with a program overview. We're going to have some time where I ask y'all questions about, what you're experiencing on Ben Allen Road. Once we've done that, we'll review some of the tools in the traffic calming toolbox. Then we'll take a look at a preliminary design concept that we've drafted up. This is intended to be for discussion's sake and just kind of give us a good starting point to use to develop our final design based on the input that we hear tonight. And then we'll discuss some of the next steps in the process. For anyone who is maybe watching the YouTube recording after this meeting has occurred, I want to make sure everyone is aware of the currently live online survey. That can be accessed by going to engage.Nashville.gov/traffic-calming or scanning the QR code that's on the right-hand side of the screen. This is the same code and URL that was distributed in the mailers, so many of you may have already seen this web page. But if not, this is a good way to access it. Okay, so jumping into the program overview, the traffic calming program in Nashville is one that focuses on residential streets. So we are not over on Dickerson Pike or Hart Lane. We are in kind of the neighborhoods that we live in. This is a program that tends to focus on physical solutions to encourage lower speeds over significant lengths. We'll go into some of the details about what a physical solution is, but generally what we're looking to do is design a street that everyone goes slow on without needing to do a whole lot of enforcement or rely mainly on like signs and things like that. And then one of the primary goals of the traffic calming program is speed reduction. So we're going to spend some time talking about both why that's important and some of the ways that we pursue slower speeds in our neighborhoods through this program. There are 3 E's in traffic calming. Those are education, enforcement, and engineering. I've got engineering bold and underlined here because of the 3, that's the thing that Nashville's Department of Transportation has the greatest ability to affect. So what we're going to try to do is design a street that doesn't need a whole lot of attention after the project has been built. And we're looking for a calm, kind of slow, safe environment without a whole lot of, perpetual input. Education is another thing we do. This meeting might be an example of that. Essentially asking everyone to drive safely, making them aware of why it's important. And then enforcement is done by Metro Nashville Police Department, when they pull people over and write tickets for speeding. We try not to rely on that as our primary traffic calming technique. Because they have a lot of other things to worry about in addition to speeding in neighborhoods. Now, the reason that speed reduction is such an important part of this program is tied to Vision Zero, which, if anyone isn't aware, is the idea that nobody should be killed or seriously injured on Nashville's public roadways. That relates to speed because the faster a car strikes a pedestrian or a cyclist, the lower the chance they have of surviving. That's demonstrated by this infographic down here, where at 25 miles an hour, somebody struck by a car has a pretty good chance of survival, but that goes way down as speeds climb up to 35 and even 45 miles an hour. So all that is to say, speed reduction is important in this program because it has a direct effect on how safe a street performs. This is a really popular program in Nashville. When Ben Allen Road was selected, there were over 600 neighborhood streets who had applied, and you were selected as one of 25 streets in the spring of 2025. We'll go into detail about how that selection is made, but essentially, the takeaway here is y'all were in that top 25 streets most in need of traffic calming, given the measurements that we were able to do. On the right side of the screen is a live map of all of the traffic calming projects in Nashville. So the thick blue lines are ones that have already been built. The light magenta lines are ones who have applied. And then all of the other colors are somewhere in between. You can see Ben Allen Road here is red because we're in the meeting and design phase. So there are a few things that the traffic calming program does as part of these projects, but there are a lot of other things that NDOT can do, or certainly Metro Nashville as a whole. So if we run into anything in this meeting that maybe we're not able to handle with this project, we want to make sure everyone is aware of Hub Nashville as a resource to report all sorts of things. So it's a good place for like sidewalk requests. Maybe some signage is broken or run down. Really anything from a pothole or a clogged storm drain all the way up to a request for a new signal can go through Hub. Okay, so about the prioritization formula or how Ben Allen got selected for traffic calming. We basically put together a weighted score based on 5 factors. Those are vehicular speeds, volume, crash history, non-driver accommodations, and trip destinations. Now you'll notice that vehicle speeds and volume, which is like how many vehicles drove on the street, make up the vast majority of the score. And the logic behind that is between the amount of cars driving on a road and how fast they're going, that's a pretty good proxy for the risk that is posed to anyone who might be using the street. We also do consider crash history because if there have been any vulnerable road user crashes in the last 10 years, that's a good indicator that there's a problem that should be solved. Non-driver accommodations is asking, like, do you have sidewalks or how much sidewalk coverage do you have? Are there any gaps? We want to incorporate that because we know if there aren't sidewalks, pedestrians would be sharing the pavement with vehicles. And then trip destinations are things like schools and parks nearby that we know generate walking trips. So all of those for Ben Allen were added up together and generated a score that ranked you in that top 25. Here's a little bit of data about Ben Allen that we collected. So the volume was 440 vehicles per day. Relative to some other traffic calming streets, that's not a ton, but we did see they were going 40 miles an hour as the 85th percent speed. Now, what that means is 85% of the vehicles measured were going some amount at or below 40 miles an hour, but then 15% of the vehicles were going faster than 40 miles an hour. We know that that is too fast to be safe in a residential neighborhood where we have people walking or biking. So that's an important piece of why we're here tonight talking about doing a project. The street width varies quite a bit, so anywhere from 23 feet at its narrowest to 42 feet at its widest. We'll talk about how that affects some of the tool choices we have a little later on, but it is an interesting kind of variety of cross sections over the length of Ben Allen. And then lastly, this is a map of the whole project. So it is the entire road stretching from Dickerson Pike over to the west, and then up and over the hill, over Ellington Parkway, and terminating down at Hart Lane. So I know that was a lot of information relatively quickly. Happy to pause for questions, but I also want to pause and ask For anyone who's on the call, like, is what I've presented so far generally consistent with how you've experienced Van Allen? Is there anything I may have missed already? We sort of want to know from you, what kind of traffic calming project do you want to have designed? And what kind of experiences are you having that we might be able to address? You're more than welcome to come off of mute or throw questions into the chat. I'll be able to see them either way.
Yes, hi. I wanted to thank you for taking the time to do this. My name is Clayton Pollard, and I've lived here for 15 years on Van Allen. And it definitely has been a problem the whole time with people, just speeding and definitely speeding and doing, oddball things like passing the double yellow lines if someone's going the speed limit in front of them. And we also get a fair amount of foot traffic on this road, which, I always worry about those people because there's some blind curves. And especially with all the new housing that's gone in, there's definitely a huge uptick with pedestrian traffic. So I think that it's coming at a very good time for us to consider this. And I do think that it's something I agree with and hope happens. So
Great. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate, Clayton is spot on. The increase of traffic. I know y'all have your numbers, but from our viewpoint, it seems more like 80% of the people on Ben Allen are at 45 or 65.
I know I thought that number seemed low myself, but
and so,
goodness.
But yeah, so Ben Allen is a unique road in the city in that it's very short, but it's very windy. So, people are traveling at a high rate of speed. We have very little sidewalk coverage and a lot of blind corners. With the new apartment building that's gone in, their entrance and exit is pretty much on two blind corners. So they face a huge danger in getting smacked by a car right there, and that's pretty much right in the middle of Ben Allen, I think. So
yeah, I noticed that there was that newer building that has been built recently while we were kind of laying out our initial concept, but that's good to know. And yeah, just a note about our speed data. It's for a particular place. So on longer roads like Ben Allen, that doesn't mean that everyone is going that speed for the whole time. We might imagine the speeds on that kind of straighter, wider section would be a little higher.
Yeah, we're down on the closer to Dickerson side, so people just are already used to going 50 on Dickerson, and then they turn on Ben Allen, so they're still going fast, and so.
Yeah, got it. Well, that's good to know.
Yes, this is Andy. I'll jump in and echo what Clayton and Steve said. I've worked on this road since 1994, and I've seen cars at very high rates of speed, and it's very dangerous, especially coming off the hill toward Hart Lane. I worked there at the business on the left at Blevins Incorporated, and I've seen some very dangerous stuff over the years. So happy this is being addressed.
Got it. Well, anything else before we jump into some of the tools that we've got to work with?
No, let's get to it.
All right. So if anyone is familiar with the traffic calming program, they'll know that a pretty good portion of our designs include what's called speed cushions. We use these often because they're an example of that kind of physical measure to pursue slower speeds. So unlike somebody writing tickets or speed limit signage, these actually like physically affect a vehicle as they're traveling over them. They work like speed bumps, but they're stretched way out to achieve a higher target speed. So something in between 20 and 25 miles an hour is sort of thought to be the ideal speed that these are designed to produce. And the reason that they have gaps in between them is to provide a reduced impact to emergency response vehicles. They're about 3 inches high, they're 6 feet wide, and they come in a variety of lengths, 7 to 14 feet. Similar to these are speed tables. These are made out of the same materials, just kind of in a different arrangement. And the main difference here is they lack those gaps. So they do not have the same kind of reduced impact to larger fire trucks, ambulances, but they do stretch all the way across the road. We tend not to use these very often. We'll sometimes pull them out in like a situation where maybe the width of the street is kind of an odd number, so we can't really fit the right amount of cushions in there, but we do use these just somewhat sparingly. Now, the reason that we use these so often in the traffic calming program is because they've been demonstrated to work pretty well. So what we're looking at here are the results of a study conducted in March of 2023, where 6 projects were measured and all observed. And before those projects, the average speed on the streets was 31 miles an hour, and afterwards it was 22. And then the 85th percent speed that we mentioned earlier came down all the way from 37 miles an hour to 25. So the hope would be on a street like Ben Allen, if we were to install vertical measures, we would see a similar degree of lowering, taking that 85th percent speed down from 40 to somewhere much closer to the speed limit and a safe speed to, share the road with pedestrians and cyclists, really whoever is there. There are plenty of places and reasons why vertical measures may not work in a particular place or on a particular street. So in those circumstances, we'll sometimes use radar feedback signs. Maybe a hill is like too steep for vertical measures to work well. We also don't put them on blind curves. So we never want to like surprise anyone with a speed cushion. So in circumstances like that, we'll sometimes use radar feedback signs to sort of fill in the gaps where maybe the cushion spacing isn't quite as ideal as we'd like it to be. These do have some impact. On their own, it's not necessarily a whole lot, but it does help remind people that the speed limit is this much and you're going this much. Please slow down if you're speeding. So these can be a helpful tool. We can also do something called narrowing with the use of white edge lines. So on roads that are much wider than is necessary to move the cars that it's moving, that can induce speeding just by providing a lot more room for people to feel maybe a little more comfortable going fast. We sort of know that if we were like driving over a really narrow bridge with walls on either side, we would be going a different speed than we are on the interstate where there's wide open space. This sort of psychologically nudges a street's design toward the bridge side of things, but it is just paint on the road to do that. It's not like physically affecting cars. It can increase the pedestrian comfort, though, on the street. If you can imagine walking on the side of the road, you might feel a little bit better knowing that there's a line clearly marking where you're supposed to be and then where a vehicle is supposed to be. So that is an added advantage of this strategy. At large intersections, we do narrowing in the form of bulb outs. So basically, when we have really large turning radii at intersections, it's easier to do that turn at a higher speed. And that's not always desirable. Sometimes we've got intersections where pedestrians will be crossing and maybe sight lines aren't as good as we'd like them to be. So there's an advantage of having vehicles use intersections slowly in case other people are using them at the same time. So when we narrow the turning radius like that, it induces the slower speeds by kind of tightening up how much room drivers have to maneuver. An added benefit is they shorten the amount of space pedestrians have to cross if they're crossing the street. So in this kind of middle image, you can imagine it may be a lot less comfortable to cross like the 40 feet it takes to get from ramp to ramp. But the 20 feet distance there in those lanes is quite a bit shorter and takes less time to get across. On wide sections of street, we can do something called chicanes. So this is where we take the center line of a road and zigzag it back and forth along the length. Similar to bulb outs, this slows speeds just by forcing vehicles to use their steering wheel and maneuver a little bit. It's not so much straightaway as it maybe once was. And really the only downside to this is it doesn't work everywhere because most streets aren't wide enough to zigzag back and forth. And it can reduce the amount of on-street parking available or just kind of where parking is. Because if we're shoving the lanes to one side of the street, we wouldn't want people parking in that particular spot. And then lastly, on really large intersections, we're sometimes able to do traffic circles. These work like bulb outs, but narrowing from the inside out instead of the outside in. They work similar to a roundabout, but essentially just asking everyone to start by doing a right turn and then go around the circle and either go straight or if you're going left, kind of go counterclockwise around it to make that left turn. So those are all the tools. Next, we've got the preliminary concept that we've drafted up. I've showed that on the screen, but I want to pause again just to see if anyone had questions about anything I've covered. If not, I'll sort of just walk you through what we're looking at here and maybe what we had in mind when we were kind of thinking about what type of design could work for Ben Allen. But anyway, wanted to pause for questions and just see. Sounds like I can go ahead and dive in. Feel free to stop me at any point if you've got a question. But so moving from Dickerson in the west direction to the east, we've got one set of speed cushions just past Highlander Drive. That is about halfway between Dickerson and Hillside Road. Hillside Road has got a little bit wide of turning radii, so we've proposed a couple of bulb outs to potentially tighten that up. Would love to hear any feedback about those, or we can go back to that slide if anyone's curious about, exactly what that consists of. Continuing east, we have another set of speed cushions at the bottom of a relatively steep hill. We think that may be where people are tending to pick up some speed. And then you'll notice a fairly large gap in between this cushion and the next. That's because on that steep hill, it's steeper than we're able to put vertical measures in without exceeding the threshold that designers are really asked to stay within. So in order to keep the traffic calming message consistent along the length, we've added a radar feedback sign measuring in the downhill direction. So if anyone did start to pick up speed, they would at least be reminded how fast they're going before they get to that next cushion. Next, we have a series of 4 cushions, 2 on either side of that apartment complex. We did hear some feedback in advance of this meeting via the online survey that this was an area of particular concern, especially with the corners that were mentioned earlier. So these 4 are spaced as, I want to say, around 400 feet apart. That's the tightest in the project, but it is kind of the middle of the range that we shoot for. And then after this series, we have what's called a reverse curve. So you turn one way, and then pretty quickly you turn the other way. Both of these curves are a little too narrow for us to put speed cushions on them and feel like drivers will have enough time to notice them. So similar to the hill, we were not able to propose speed cushions here, but have included 2 radar feedback signs, one facing either direction. The last section is another series of 4 cushions. You'll notice these are spread out a little more, and that's actually mainly due to driveway constraints. So we don't want to put speed cushions within 15 feet of anybody's driveway. This allows everyone to be able to back out and then proceed to wherever they might be going without having to interact with a cushion during that maneuver. Because the driveways here are somewhat spaced closely together, we had to be a little strategic on where we proposed them. But it is an even spacing that we hope will continue to remind drivers that this is a neighborhood, traffic calmed street, and a safe speed of travel is expected, and then enforced with the use of vertical measures there. And then last but not least, the road widens out to about 42 feet as it crosses Ellington Parkway. I think that when they build bridges like this over highways, they kind of just like to plan ahead and make sure any amount of width that might be necessary is there. But it's still just 2 lanes. So you have 2, 21-foot lanes, and that's much, much wider than a travel lane needs to be. So we're proposing edgeline narrowing for that section, basically to just keep an even section of roadway for drivers to drive on. And hopefully, if there are any pedestrians walking here, there will be an added bit of safety where that space is, visually separated. So that's the whole spiel. I know I covered a lot of different information there, but did that generally make sense to everyone? Do we have any thoughts, ideas? Is there anything I've missed and maybe did not design around that I should know about before we do our site visit and ultimately develop the design?
I've got a couple questions real quick.
Sure.
So number one, would the white medium line extend all the way down the road? I mean, or is that just on that typical picture, but might not be on the road itself for the speed cushions?
There are sections of the road that are not wide enough to need it, but as soon as it becomes wide enough where it's a benefit, we'll have it there. So I'm thinking like as soon as we start getting wider than like 24 feet, we'll start it and then stop it once it narrows down to about 24 feet.
Okay. Also, another question: how does having the speed cushions affect plowing? The handful of times that we need plowing.
That's a good question. So the plows should be able to kind of pick the blade up and go up and over the speed cushions. We've had some success with that last winter. Also learned some lessons last winter, but they are plowable. And then the good news is they are kind of this black rubber material. So in snow events, they tend to be the first thing that melts. Like you can imagine a clump of leaves will attract the sun and heat up a little bit. So typically speed cushions have not given the plows an inordinate amount of trouble.
Okay. Oh, one more thing too. I know you said the 15-foot that you try to place them not within 15 feet of someone's driveway. However, are the speed cushion pictograms on the map pretty accurate to where you're going to place them?
It sort of depends. So what we've done so far is taken enough of a look at Ben Allen to know that a design like this would work pretty well. Like this is, something I'd be comfortable proceeding with if we don't hear any feedback that like changes, how we're thinking about this project. So yeah, relatively accurately, all the places that you see that C icon are ones where we've more or less verified it's a good candidate for a cushion to be.
Okay, yeah, I do like the map. I agree with your decisions on it. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I feel like the layout is good. The where the bulb out is, um, what is the plan kind of there? Do y'all have that kind of drawn up yet, or not yet?
Not in detail.
Okay,
Let me go back and I can kind of
because
describe.
that's just okay. So yeah, the bulb out is just kind of extending the curves like that.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, gotcha.
Now, I will say, for the sake of comparison, this image on the bottom right, um, at that spot, Ben Allen is not as wide as either of these streets.
Yep.
So we won't extend them very far into the road, but they'll extend like into the corners of the intersection, if that makes sense.
Yep. Gotcha. Okay. Cool.
I've got one more kind of unrelated question, but I'm curious, with all the apartments going in up the road, um, do you propose that there's future plans for putting in a sidewalk or potentially extending the very small amount of sidewalk that we have existing?
That's a great question. I don't know about plans for sidewalk extension. Um, Sometimes developments are asked to build portions of sidewalk as part of like a rezoning, or something like that. But that's all pretty contingent on like the specific plan for a development. Um, in terms of like a city-led project, there's not one that I know of right now. Um, but
Okay.
it is something that can be requested on Hub, kind of make it known that there's a need for one, and then may be able to build one a little further down the line. I will say that the two kinds of projects are pretty different. Traffic calming is mostly like quick build materials in the street. Sidewalks are a little more involved since they sometimes involve like buying property and altering drainage patterns, things like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, well, next we're going to talk about how this project proceeds, like some of the next steps. Before we move on, are there any other questions or thoughts on the plan that we're looking at here?
Sorry, he had to step away for just a second, but I had a question. So this might just be kind of in line with like all the sidewalk stuff, but as far as like traffic lights at either end, would that be outside of y'all's purview as well? Because I know just with all of the developments, especially going in on like Hart Lane and then apartments like on Dickerson right outside of there, that we're having issues with like the stop sign and stuff.
Yeah, it is definitely outside of what this project is able to accomplish. It is something that can be requested on Hub. We've done it in previous projects, just sort of like made the request. Usually there's a pretty like quick study that is done by NDOT when those come in to see if one is like what's called warranted. Um, but when new developments come in, often they're asked to perform a traffic study that also asks that question. So basically, they're predicting how many trips will be generated by a given development, and does that rise to the level of needing some infrastructure upgrades associated with it. So,
Okay, gotcha.
yeah, that being said, if enough development goes in along Ben Allen for that to be necessary, it's something that we could expect to happen.
Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, because I think the last time we submitted for a study, they got denied, but that was also before a lot of those apartments and stuff started going up. So, okay.
Yeah.
So hey everybody, this is Councilmember Sean Parker. Thanks for everybody who's here this evening and the folks who submitted the application in the first place to get this process going. It's super exciting for Ben Allen. I did want to note that for the possibility of getting signals at either end of Ben Allen, both Hart Lane and Dickerson are slated for considerable improvements from the Choose How You Move transit plan that was adopted. And it's possible that signalization could be a component of what goes on either of those streets or both of those streets. So definitely, yeah, request it via Hub, bring it up in every meeting that we have, and just kind of keep beating that drum, and hopefully we can make it happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for chiming in there, council member. That's very true. Great. Well, we can move on to talk about the next steps, and we'll also have plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So if you think of anything, we can come back to any of these slides. What we're looking at here is a flowchart of the program. As we mentioned, this started with an application from residents in the neighborhood. We then went through the data collection prioritization process where Ben Allen was selected. And we're here at the red circle, the first neighborhood meeting, where we present kind of our draft design, collect input from you all, and really get a feel for kind of what this neighborhood is looking for in a traffic calming project. The next step is design. So what we need to do is a site visit to make sure we fully understand the grades, the widths, any other factors that might help us, provide an informed design for the street, and then ultimately draw up construction plans that we'll be able to give to a contractor to have them build the project. Once that's done, we can do one of two things. We can schedule a second neighborhood meeting where we review the construction plans that we've drafted, make sure that any changes, things that we've discussed tonight are acted upon. Or we can post the plans online and proceed with the online ballot. Basically skipping the second neighborhood meeting to sort of speed up the implementation process a little bit. Once a ballot is done, and if 2/3 of respondents vote yes, the project will be entered into the construction queue, which is around 8 to 10 months. But that's kind of a window, like a range of time. Just wanted to set expectations that there is kind of a line of traffic calming projects waiting to be built, and you'll be added to the end of that. A little bit about the balloting. Actually, I'm going to go back. Does anyone feel strongly one way or another? Do we want to have a second meeting or do the online ballot a little earlier? We're really fine doing either. So anyone's opinion is welcome here.
I would say, I mean, I guess y'all will mail us the kind of plans, I guess.
So what
they'll
we'll
be
do
available on the online portal.
Yeah, we'll mail a postcard that looks like this in the top left, and that link will bring you to the site where the plans are posted.
Okay, but then if we need any changes or anything like that, then I guess we would have to schedule a meeting or something. I'm wondering if I guess what are the advantages of having a meeting versus balloting?
Yeah, you're right. So once we post the plans and start the ballot, we would only alter them if there was like a pretty serious thing we might have like overlooked. Maybe like a new safety concern is brought up or something along those lines. If more input is necessary to arrive at a design that y'all are comfortable voting on, then a second meeting, we could take a look at those plans, see what y'all think, and then move on to the ballot after doing any like revisions.
How much?
I guess oh, sorry, go ahead.
How much extra time would adding the second meeting? I mean, we'd still be within that 8 to 10 month construction window.
It wouldn't add much time, maybe like a month or two. It sort of just depends on scheduling and how quickly we're able to get it on the calendar.
Yeah, I feel like we could do a second neighborhood meeting and just, 15, 20 minutes, let everybody voice their opinion. And I feel like if we're all good, then we just move to the ballot phase and get it done.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and make that the plan. Once we have our design nearly ready to go, we'll reach out and get this meeting scheduled so we can keep the project moving.
One more quick thing. I assume the answer, if for some reason the online ballot does not hit the 66%, is everything dead in the water at that point?
Not everything. So when we send out ballots, the real question at hand is, are folks okay with the vertical measures portions? So we try not to leave neighborhoods hanging if they didn't get the full 66%, and we'll design a project that doesn't have speed cushions, but does include kind of the pavement narrowing, like radar feedback signs, stuff that's a little bit less invasive, and don't necessitate any yes or no balloting. Does that make sense? I feel like that was maybe a little convoluted.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Okay, great.
I just need to know if I need to start going out and canvassing to all my neighbors. Be like, vote yes.
That's what I was thinking too, right?
No, we've had plenty of neighborhoods that have chosen to do that, and with generally pretty good results. I guess to that end, so I'll skip ahead just a little bit. This is the list of property owners that were sent the invitation to this meeting and will be sent the balloting card. So what it is any owner of a parcel that is residential, a church, a school. If it's like a operating business, I don't remember exactly what's over here on Dickerson, but like a, auto mechanic would not be balloted here. Just kind of the residents of the street. And then vacant properties. So if there's no buildings or anything on it, those are ineligible as well. We also take out duplicates. So if you have 10 properties, you only get one vote. You don't get 10. But anyway, we can send this list out to y'all if you're interested in reaching out to people, like which neighbors to canvass. That would be fine. If that's something that you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd be interested in that.
Great. I will make a note of that. And we'll do that after the second meeting, so we don't need to get into it too much now. But
yep, perfect.
Yeah. Cool. Well, all the balloting stuff we'll cover in more detail in meeting number 2. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to speak to them, but it'll be a little more relevant once we're getting closer to that point in time. Well, with that, do we have any questions about anything at all in the program? I've just about reached the end of my slides here.
No questions here.
One more question I just thought of. So there's a number of newer subdivisions with multiple houses where they have, a shared driveway and all that enters into Ben Allen. How does that work? Do only the close, whatever is the closest house get a vote, or do people that access Ben Allen and have a little small, portion of shared driveway?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do have an example of this in action here. But basically, if a parcel that touches Ben Allen Road is owned in common by a group of condo, or I don't exactly know what the technical term is, but a parcel that is a smaller piece within the donut of the larger one, all of them are given a vote. So you don't need to be the condo that is closest to Ben Allen. If you're within that larger owned in common parcel, they'll be getting invitations and ballots.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right. Well, one more reminder about the live online survey. If anything else comes up, you're welcome to share feedback there. It'll be open like through balloting, so any point in time up until and a little bit after, meeting 2, feedback can be offered. And then if there's any reason to reach out to me, feel free to take down my email address. I'll ask that you also copy N.TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. That keeps the whole team kind of in the loop and make sure everyone's on the same page. But yeah, if no other questions are there, we can wrap up for the evening. Always a little plug for NDOT's social media presence. And yeah, thank you all for your time tonight. Really appreciate the good participation and insight you had to offer.
Yeah, thank you for having this meeting. This was great, very informative, and we'll be sure to smash that like and subscribe, over there on YouTube or whatever.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you, David. And also, Ben, thank you for being on top of the emails and keeping us in the loop.
Yeah, thank you for the information. Greatly appreciate it.
Anytime. Y'all have a great rest of your evening.
You too. Bye.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody.